Welcome to the AI Chat podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of being joined by Ron Whitworth, who is the Chief Privacy Officer at Truist in Charlotte, North Carolina. He is managing the Enterprise Privacy and Technology Office, and Ron is a fellow of information privacy. He's a certified information privacy manager and a certified information privacy professional from the United States, Canada, and Europe, as certified by the AIPP. Ron is also a member of the Department of Homeland Security's Data Privacy and Integrity Advisor Committee. And with everything that is happening in AI today, we know that privacy is incredibly important. So we're super excited to have Ron on the show. Welcome to the show today, Ron.
Thanks, Jaden. I really appreciate you having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I wanted to kick this off and ask you a little bit about your journey and kind of what got you interested in this space. Has this whole area of like data and privacy been something that you've always been interested in, as you know, kind of where you thought you would move towards in your career, or is this kind of something new that you discovered as you went along? Tell us a little bit about your journey to become where you are today.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've actually been in the privacy field for a long time. I originally was a sports reporter. It was my first career. I was in the media covering.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So this time of year, I always think back and think, oh man, did I make the right move? It seems like it'd be fun to be at these college football games. But no, I decided to go to law school and graduated in 2006. So it's been a while since I made that switch. And when I initially went into the legal field, I was focusing on communications law, kind of the regulation of the media. And at that time, privacy was just a subset of communications law. It was just starting to pop out as sort of a niche area that was of interest to people. And I was very fortunate in that I landed in a law firm with a leader who really saw that this was going to blow up. And she gave me a fantastic opportunity to get certified in privacy and become the firm's expert in privacy and data security law. And so that was my introduction into privacy, going on about 17 years now. And over the last 17 years, it has just continually grown and really exploded on the scene. And now with AI, it's a very similar story. We're seeing, it's been in development for a long time, but as you know better than I do, it's just exploding on the scene, and it reminds me a lot of what's happened in privacy.
Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today.
A Netflix original film.
The Wi-Fi isn't working.
In the event of a global communications breakdown, do the following. Stay inside.
What just happened here is happening everywhere.
Avoid strangers.
We've all been deserted.
I don't trust them.
And most importantly, do not panic. Julia Roberts.
What happens next?
Mahershala Ali.
I knew something was coming.
Leave the World Behind. Rated R. Now playing only on Netflix.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really cool that you've kind of been there from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Because definitely, I think probably the first wave that a lot of like consumers and maybe business people really started thinking about it was with some of the regulation coming out of the EU. And then now, of course, with AI, this is something that is top of mind for everyone, right? Like, how do we keep our data private, secure? How are we kind of handling this entire issue? It's very, very relevant in AI today. I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit about the role of a chief privacy officer, and maybe especially in kind of the context of AI development at financial institutions like Truist, where you're at.
Yeah, of course. It's been really fascinating to watch as AI has exploded on the scene, how privacy professionals have really kind of latched onto it as this is the new frontier for privacy. In a lot of ways, it's really just the newest iteration of what we consider, the privacy profession. The privacy industry itself, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, the IAPP, really digging in. They announced this week that they have a certification in AI that they're rolling out, and really looking to dig in across the industry. But it's not solely a privacy issue too. So there's a lot of questions about how do you piece together the governance structures for AI, who needs to be involved, and so forth. But fundamentally, there's so many similarities and commonalities between AI and privacy that what we're finding is a lot of privacy professionals are uniquely situated to help companies sort through the issues, talk about the risks, talk about the compliance implications, and help navigate companies through some of these initial challenges, especially as we don't yet have a lot of definitive laws and regulations. They're coming fast and furious, but right now, a lot of it's more, hey, let's look at best practices. Let's think through what this is likely to look like. And let's make sure we don't start building stuff that we have to undo 2 or 3 years from now.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really interesting sentiment I've heard echoed from a lot of different industries, is like, there's a lot of regulation that's kind of in the work, and you kind of have to be on top of where it's going and the market sentiment, where you think that people are going to kind of be pushing this, because like you said, you don't want to be building things that you have to undo or change, or that are going to get disrupted by, regulation or other areas. Something I'd be curious to ask you a bit about is, how do privacy concerns in the financial sector, kind of different from those in other industries when it comes to AI?
Yeah, they do differ in that, we are very highly regulated in the financial services industry. And we in our industry, for example, we have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. So we have some very significant heightened privacy and security standards that maybe some other industries don't quite have yet. That can be a good thing and a bad thing. And in a good way, what's been interesting to me is some of the industries outside of financial services are looking to banks and financial services companies, because now they're going to be held to very similar standards, both in classic privacy and then for AI. So that's been helpful. But I think one of the challenges is also that it tends to slow us down in terms of the ability to be really jumping into the water with AI. When this really started to explode onto the scene, I was at the IAPP Global Privacy Summit earlier this year, and I felt a little uncomfortable because there was this big meeting with the Future of Privacy Forum where they bring all of these, CPOs from across different industries together, and they asked the question. He said, "Hey, raise your hand if you have banned ChatGPT in your organization." And I raised my hand, and I looked around, and I did not see another hand up. So it was like, but then I realized, wait a minute, I think I'm the only big bank in this room, So, and then a couple of weeks later, I was in a Bank Policy Institute meeting with my peers in the financial services industry. Same question was raised, and all the hands went up. So it was an interesting contrast to me to say, look, we've got to be more conservative in financial services because we are highly regulated. We've got a lot of expectations and highly sensitive data that it has, incredibly important protections attached to it. That being said, we also have to be cognizant that this is the way the world is going, and we see all these other industries jumping in. So we've got to strike that balance and get where they are.
Yeah. I think that's definitely something. And of course, we've seen a lot of other big banks, like you mentioned, have kind of announced similar kind of bans. And there is all these kind of privacy issues there. So striking that balance is definitely got to be a unique challenge, I feel like, to your industry. I'm wondering, as a fellow of information privacy, what are some best practices you recommend for AI developers to really ensure that they have good data privacy?
Yeah, one of the things is that a lot of people are sitting back waiting for these new AI laws, and they're kind of figuring this out and thinking through, well, this is all something brand new and it's unprecedented. But that's not entirely the case. I think you have to keep in mind that there are many existing laws and regulations that apply to AI now. And there are also some frameworks that really have worked for many, many years, particularly in privacy. We refer to them as the Fair Information Practice Principles, or the FIPS. Ironically, they were drafted in the 1970s, but they are still really the bedrock of the vast majority of the privacy laws across the world. And they apply just the same to AI. When you think about things like transparency and access controls and giving customers choices and that sort of thing, you can take those foundational principles and apply it in the AI context, and it really does translate, and it provides a little bit more certainty than I think some would realize. You often get into these conversations from a benchmarking perspective, and the gut reaction is, oh my gosh, this is all brand new, and we just don't have any clarity. But that's not entirely the case. There's a body of knowledge out there that you can really leverage to have a little bit more certainty than you otherwise would.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Something else I would also be kind of interested in hearing about, because looking into your background, you've done some really interesting things. I'm wondering, how does your work with the Department of Homeland Security's DPIAC kind of influence your approach to privacy in AI, for example?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's been a really unique opportunity for me. I as part of a federal advisory committee that helps advise the Department of Homeland Security on privacy and cybersecurity issues. And essentially what happens is it's a great cross-section of public and private sector privacy professionals and cybersecurity professionals that are brought in to basically advise on questions that pop up with the DHS. And typically, they start as, secret clearance or top secret clearance matters. But at the end of the day, they often get published, and we have public meetings that discuss the work. And, so one of the things that I worked on in recent years was about biometrics and airports, for example, where it's it's very similar to what we're seeing with AI, where it's like, we have this amazing new technology that has so much benefit, but let's talk about all the risks. What are all the unintended consequences? You can't just, be bringing in a bunch of biometrics and use it for whatever you would like to use it for, because there are a lot of implications to the cybersecurity and privacy aspects of that use. And so the Department of Homeland Security has done a great job of leveraging the team to make sure that they understand, let's talk about all the implications. Let's bring in some outside expertise and talk it through so that it would inform their decisions internally. And so that's been very valuable to me to just to be a part of that. It's a great experience, and also have the benefit of listening to my peers as well. That is extremely valuable to me to kind of see how other industries approach these problems and slightly different ways. Yeah.
That's super interesting, and really interesting kind of real world examples of how that's being implemented and what that looks like.
Yeah.
On like another thread, I would love to ask you a little bit about some like real world examples of how privacy professionals are kind of getting involved in AI projects within the financial services.
Sure. It's a hot topic. Every privacy session I go to, this is the topic: AI governance and how are you involved?
Yeah.
And are you involved? And if so, how are you involved? It really ranges quite a bit by organization. Typically, what you see at a minimum is that the chief privacy officer or the privacy team is deeply involved in some form of a working group related to AI, where at a minimum, you're a key stakeholder along with legal, the business, technology, cybersecurity, ethics, marketing. I mean, there's just so many different stakeholders that have a need to be involved. In some cases, we've seen the privacy leaders of organizations step up and also kind of lead the way from an AI governance perspective. So we're starting to see the role of the chief privacy officer evolve into, in some cases, chief AI officer or chief data and ethical responsibility officer and that sort of thing. So that's really fascinating. It's providing a lot of opportunity for privacy professionals to step up and to really broaden their horizons. And it's interesting to me just because, I mentioned I've been doing this for a while. When I started, this was very much a compliance exercise, where you would have the business or the technology leaders go off and create something, and then they would bring it to legal and compliance for that checkbox. You either approve it or you don't. And through what we call privacy by design, there's always been a push to, hey, let's get a seat at the table. Let's actually be involved from the very beginning of creation of these products and services, because the last thing you want to be is the person who says no, So in the AI context, we're really seeing that next evolution of privacy by design, where the privacy professionals in many cases are getting that seat at the table, because as we develop these new products and services and leverage these new capabilities, you want to have that real-time feedback from privacy. How can we do this? How can you make this happen? What pitfalls do we have? And, and what things are off the table? Let's just eliminate some of the things that we really can't be doing, like high-risk processing that they would consider in the EU, for example. So it's been great. It's a really a unique opportunity for privacy professionals to get involved in some new ways.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of switching your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling. Harness the best converting checkout and same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Stop leaving sales on the table. Discover why millions trust Shopify to build, grow, and run their business. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech23.
This episode is brought to you by Klaviyo, the platform that powers smarter digital relationships. With Klaviyo, you can activate all your customer data in real time, connect seamlessly with your customers across all channels, guide your marketing strategy with AI-powered insights, recommendations, and automated assistance, deliver experiences that feel individually designed at scale, and grow your business faster. Power smarter digital relationships with Klaviyo. Learn more at klaviyo.com/Spotify. That's KLAVIYO.com/Spotify.
That's really smart. And I think you're dead on with the importance of really kind of getting privacy by default started early. I think especially today when we're looking at, companies that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases training these AI models and doing different things, like, they really do not want to make these massive investments up front and then find out something they're doing is, fundamentally going to lead them to a lot of issues. So, they really want to make sure that they're structuring this all in a way that is really sound and has privacy at its heart from the very beginning. So I think that's really incredibly important. You touched on a little bit Europe and kind of what they're doing there, and I'm curious about other countries as well. I'm wondering, what are some of the legal frameworks that most impact AI and privacy in the financial sector? Maybe particularly U.S., Canada, Europe, those kind of places.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, the starting point is really the privacy frameworks that exist. So in Europe, for example, the GDPR has direct applicability to much of what we're doing with AI. HIPAA in Canada, of course, GLBA in the U.S. for financial institutions. But what we're seeing in the U.S. specifically is a lot of these state laws that are popping up that are we don't have yet a federal privacy law that is really an omnibus privacy law for the United States, the way that GDPR is in the EU, but the states are really stepping up. And so, for example, California has really the leading privacy law in the United States, the California Privacy Rights Act, which is the second iteration of what started as the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. What's really interesting is that with the second iteration of its privacy law, they have a set of regulations that were in development and are now drafted and are out there for comment that relate to what they call automated decision making. And really, the way that they're thinking about these regulations is almost a mini EU AI Act. It's almost like a sort of a mini artificial intelligence law within the privacy law in California. So they're using the opportunity in enhancing their privacy law to start addressing AI. And I think we're going to see a lot of other states follow suit. We already see a lot of states introducing AI laws, but we might see it in the context of the existing privacy laws. And there are some fairly challenging provisions within that law, and it really does start to cover some of the bases that the EU AI Act covers as it relates to AI. So I think, privacy professionals are very, very in tune to those acts in the U.S. But for those who don't have robust privacy teams or privacy lawyers, they should really take a look, particularly at what's happening in California, because it's very educational, not only for current state, but California is leading the way, and it is likely to be kind of a standard that will apply across the board within the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, a question about that specifically. Of course, we have the EU that's rolling out their big legislation and whatnot. California's rolling out theirs. So my understanding is, right, let's say California, solidifies this. Companies wanting to do business in California have to comply. Does California and perhaps this act they're rolling out kind of by default force, essentially all companies within the United States to follow suit? If multiple states come up with different laws, but they're slightly different, is that going to force people to really go to that level? And is it something that we should have different states kind of doing these different rules, or is it something that would be perhaps better at a federal level to kind of roll out. I'd love to just get your like opinion and thoughts on that. I know that's something that a lot of people are like,
oh yeah,
wrap their mind around.
It's an excellent question, and it's top of mind concern for companies, because that's exactly what we had in the privacy space, where the laws are different enough that it creates a real compliance nightmare for, especially for smaller companies that maybe don't have the resources to manage through all these different things. To the credit of the legislators, regulators, they are really doing a great job in the AI space of talking to each other. So California, for example, is spending a lot of time with the folks who drafted the EU AI Act. They would like there to be a level of consistency amongst the different jurisdictions that are passing these laws, and they're often leveraging the same experts and the same sort of foundational principles that are underpinning the beginnings of these laws. And there's really an effort for them to be information sharing. So I think that there's a lot of hope that we will have less of a concern of that lack of consistency in the AI space. But you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, what you typically will see is companies will be forced to kind of adopt that most conservative view. So let's look at the most strict state, and we're going to follow that because it's easier to do that than to try to follow a patchwork of laws that are just a compliance headache. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, something I've heard kind of both sides of this. Some people saying like, okay, all this regulation is going to stifle growth. I've actually heard other people say this regulation creates certainty in the market and actually helps, attract investments and accelerate growth. From your perspective and what you're seeing, do you feel like this regulation is needed, or do you feel like this regulation is like stifling to, let's say, innovation or growth or something?
I don't think it's stifling. I think as long as there's the right balance and the business considerations are heard, it's a good thing. I think the more certainty we have, the better. There's always been this pattern where technology outpaces the legislation. That's just always the case, where you're always playing a guessing game about what we're building today. How is it going to stand up tomorrow? So in my personal opinion, it is very helpful to have more certainty, and particularly an understanding of where things are headed. So even if it's not set in stone, I think it's very helpful when California, for example, has been good about providing a platform for feedback. They're not just throwing out regulations and saying, hey, deal with it. They're providing the opportunity for folks to provide their comments and feedback, and they've listened to it. They've listened to it in the privacy context. Same thing with other states, Colorado, Virginia. I mean, they've really done a nice job of engaging the industry and hearing, how will this impact you? What are we missing? And that's important. I think if that relationship is there and that dialogue continues, at the end of the day, you're going to have a much better law, and the companies will have a better, opportunity to not only to weigh in, but to be compliant at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful and very true. Something I'd love to ask you about is, what are some common misconceptions about AI and privacy that you kind of encounter in your role?
One of them I think is that this is just some sort of a fad. It's funny, when ChatGPT first came on the scene, it was kind of like, so you would hear people say, oh, this is just the next metaverse or the next NFT, and it's just going to go away. Yeah. And I think it's starting to set in with folks that this is not a fad. This is equivalent to the internet. It's the equivalent to the iPhone. This is a groundbreaking development that it's not an overnight sensation. It's like when you talk to the folks, like many in your community that have been working on this for decades, years, if not decades. It's like, this is not new. It's just, this is the result of many, many years of work, and it's coming to fruition. And it is going to change the world. There's just no doubt about it. So I think getting over that hurdle for companies is kind of an important step, where I think a lot of the bigger companies are already clear over that step. But I do still hear a lot of those rumblings. When you talk particularly to smaller and mid-sized companies, they're like, is this really that big of a deal? Is this just another fad that is just going to go away? And I just don't see it that way at all. And I think the same is true for the way that privacy professionals are reacting to it. I see this as a huge opportunity. As I mentioned, privacy itself has exploded in the last 10, 15 years. And this is just a unique opportunity for privacy professionals to leverage their own expertise and experience and just broaden out into a whole new horizon. There sometimes you hear some pushback from longtime privacy professionals saying, "Oh my gosh, is every panel going to be about AI? Is every benchmarking conversation?" It's because it really is permeating every conversation. But I understand that, but I also think we have to really own it and really take take accountability and ownership for it and help drive it, because it's going to be impactful to our companies, to ourselves, our own personal careers, and it's here to stay. So.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. And like, I definitely do get like the kind of AI fatigue thing. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much, whatever. But I think, for a lot of people looking at number one, the amount of money being poured into AI, the amount of companies adopting it, like the amount of industries it's touching. It's not just like, it's like a metaverse. It kind of relates to like this sort of industry or this type of person. Like really this touches everyone. And so I think people are kind of realizing beyond just like a bubble or like a hype wave, this is something that is like fundamentally shifting the way a lot of things are done. And it's probably never going to go back to how it was before. This is kind of the new way technology is evolving. So definitely a big shift. As we wrap up this podcast today, a question I would love to kind of finish this off with is like, looking ahead, what kind of emerging technologies do you think are going to pose the greatest challenges or opportunities for privacy in the financial sector kind of looking forward?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of common opportunities and challenges for financial services. I think one thing that is shared amongst a lot of our peers is the opportunity to perform a lot better customer service using LLMs particularly, and really there's a race to sort of develop an internal capability, whether leveraging a Microsoft or Amazon or IBM to build sort of a privatized version of an LLM that can help companies provide better client service, whether that's answering customer calls or providing guidance to clients. When you think about just the ability to leverage data and have a lot more at your fingertips in real time to provide better guidance and faster guidance to your clients and your teammates within your own organization, that is extremely powerful. And I think some of the use cases that we're seeing really evolve right now involve the sort of the customer service angle, because first of all, we're reluctant to be leveraging client data. We don't want to be dropping client data into LLMs at this point. It's just too risky. But if we're dropping our own policies, procedures, and ways to help clients into these tools and providing our own teammates the opportunity to provide faster and better guidance, is just going to really expedite a lot of our success across the board as an industry. And then on the flip side, I would say, one thing that's a little disconcerting to me is there's so much talk about all the positive benefits and the proactive uses, not so much on the defensive side, all the fraud implications and the identity theft implications of this technology. And you do hear some talk about it, but it really pales in comparison to the proactive uses of AI. When you look at the capabilities here and you see just how realistic some of these, deep fakes can be, and the social engineering implications, the identity theft and fraud implications, we're also going to have to be really, really aggressive in terms of building those controls to deal with that and make sure that we are enhancing authentication mechanisms and really paying close attention to how the tools are being used by bad actors. Because they can have some serious negative implications as well. We're all really, really excited about the positive implications, but have to be really eyes wide open about all of the risks that are associated with it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, especially with really, really being eyes open on some of the risks and all of that we're seeing. Ron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, sharing your insights. It has been phenomenal. I'm going to leave a link in the description or in the show notes as well to Truist if people are interested in checking out Truist and looking at that as a good solution for their business as well. But once again, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your insights. To the listeners, thank you so much for tuning into the AI Chat podcast. and make sure to rate us wherever you get your podcasts.